Wow. Hey, comic book fans, you know that music. At least we hope you know that music. It's another edition of Comic Book Catch Up, where friends of Systematic Geekology get together and they catch up on the comic books that they are reading. And it's been a while since I've done this, so I'm very excited to be here to talk with my friend Andy. We geek out on similar tastes of comic books, specifically the X-Men and those Merry Mutants. And so we got a lot to talk about today. So let's hear some cheers. Yeah. Andy, I know it's been a while since we visited this, but what since it's comic book ketchup, what remind me again what your favorite like condiment is for burgers and hot dogs and things? What is
Yeah,
your
I
favorite
think I
condiment?
think the last time I said Taco Cat hot sauce, a small batch hot sauce that my parents provide me from New York City.
Nice, because they know
Uh,
you know the palindrome Taco Cat spelled
yes,
backwards is still
yes.
Taco Cat.
And are you familiar with the card game Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza?
No.
Okay, it's a card game. You're drawing cards, and they either have a taco or a goat or pizza on them and different things. It's a silly little game. It's one of these like you're trying to get rid of all your cards
Mm.
kind of games. But the fun thing about Taco Cat hot sauce is that if you put that on a pizza with some goat cheese, you can make a Taco Cat goat cheese pizza
And play that card game, and
and play the
then
card game.
you've got super meta,
Right, and
with
you
all
don't have to
the
be Alf.
I love that. Yeah, I do like ketchup, but and I like ranch, but we've been going back and forth down to Wilmington to help my family and things, and there's a like a burger joint that we go to called PT's, and for some reason, whenever I go there, I definitely get their honey mustard, and I dip their French fries in the honey mustard, and even I found myself dipping my hamburger in the honey mustard and eating it, and I don't know why, but I love it. And it's good, and I don't do it any other place other than PT. So, but right now I'm on a honey mustard kick. So that's kind of my condiment of choice these days when it comes to that. Cool, cool,
Awesome.
cool. Well, yeah. Well, welcome to another episode of Systematic Ecology and a comic book catch up. And before we get to like the main topic of some big books that are coming out that are taking over the comic book scene and that have all the message boards and eBay auctions going crazy. We thought we'd do some quick hits and some comic books that we're reading that we're interested in that aren't part of the main books we're talking about today. So, yeah, Andy, what are some books? This is our lightning round. Man, where I gotta find it. I queued it up. Here it is. Boom. There it is. Lightning round. Yeah, some quick hits. We have a graphic here of some of the ones that I've been reading. I grew up Marvel and a lot of Marvel comics, mainly X-Men, but of course I love the Trinity of DC. More on that later. Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, and but as of late, kind of my later years of collecting comics, I follow more of creative teams than I do specific characters. There's definitely habits that I have when it comes to like X-Men, Avengers, and certain some of my favorite characters. But if there's a creative team that I've liked in the past, I'll hop in whatever they're writing. And so right now, DC has Mark Waid and some of my favorite artists, Samsey, I think that's how you say it, and then and Dan Mora. So I'm really been loving Justice League Unlimited, this kind of reboot of the Justice League team with Mark Waid and Dan Mora. And then Batman and Robin Year One with Mark Waid and Samsey. So I really love those two books. And then I got to throw in there, of course, I'm reading Immortal Thor because I've been a part of the Across the Bifrost podcast where we talk about Thor a lot, and we've been really loving Al Ewing's run on Thor and his long form storytelling. He has some A plot, B plot, C plots, kind of like Chris Claremont and Walt Simonson. Ewing is cut from that same cloth and doing that with Immortal Thor, and I've really been been loving that book. Annie, are you reading those books? Are you keeping up with any of those three?
I'm keeping up with Immortal Thor. Um, mostly the DC books these days I read on Hoopla through the library, and
Ah,
so I'm a little bit behind on those kinds of things. But Mark Waid and Chris Samnee on Daredevil was fantastic. So
yeah.
I will definitely be looking forward to Batman and Robin when that's available, or I might make the effort to find that a little bit sooner in a different way. But yeah, so Immortal Thor is the one that I'm reading, and yeah, that's a great book. Al Ewing has done a lot of books that I've enjoyed. I especially there was that one issue where it was Roxxon presents
Oh,
Thor. That was such a fun
mhm.
one. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Chad
that's a
Hammer. Chad
yeah,
Hammer.
so
It's
good.
the best. It is. It is good. And I've become. I think one of my favorite DC characters as of late is Nightwing, and Dick Grayson. And so, seeing a young Robin under Mark Waid's writing has been a lot of fun. And the art's just fantastic. And I've coming off of Tom Taylor's run on Nightwing was very very good. And now Tom Taylor's on Detective Comics, so he's writing Batman, and that's been pretty fun too. But really loving Nightwing, Dick Grayson, and so this Batman and Robin year one, where Robin is learning the ropes, just fresh under the Wayne Manor, under that roof, has and the learning curve that goes along with that has been fun to watch and hear how Mark Waid weaves that tale. So super good. How about yourself? What are you reading these days?
Yep. So my picks, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Ryan North on Fantastic Four, and a whole host of different artists now. It's in the 20s issues, so there's been a variety of artists on that book. But man, oh man, he just keeps coming up with fun concepts, fun sci-fi ideas.
Hmm.
I listened to a podcast interview with him recently where he was talking about what a mistake it was for himself to commit to this sort of one and done format on Fantastic Four because he's just burning through ideas so quickly.
Wow.
Um, but he's still doing it. They're still coming. It's still a lot of fun. The other thing that I'd kind of caught, but he highlighted in that interview was the way that he like each book kind of focuses on a pair of characters each issue, and so that helps to add some variety to it, which I think is a really fun feature of the book. So you get some interesting combinations that aren't immediately obvious, like what the Reed Richards and Alicia Masters team up in Blood Hunt was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's neat to see those different pairings. His Johnny Storm is delightfully himbo, and yeah, so just
And like you said, it's a throwback. Like there was a day when comics weren't written just for the trades to sell those. Like they were one and done, or short form storytelling, knowing that this creative team may be on this book for hundreds of issues, but you read up a comic, you have a story, you end it, you can't wait for the next one. Of course, they're known for cliffhangers and that final page to keep you coming back. But there's a day when there were comics more often than not that were kind of one and done stories. You read it, and that was great. And I think Ryan Miller they still have threads in there that you can pull from later on ideas. So other people can pull from that, or maybe the movie will try out some of that stuff too. But yeah, he's really knocking it out of the park with Fantastic Four, 100%.
yep. And then I've also been enjoying some of the Ultimate books. Oddly enough, Ultimate X Men I have a hard time clicking with, but the Ultimates and Ultimate Spider Man, a
Yeah,
lot of fun. Again, a lot of big ideas, an interesting take on sort of the whole concept of the world that the maker, the evil Reed Richards, did away with all the superhero origins, and so Tony Stark is having to kind of reverse engineer them and retroactively add. It's like one giant retcon of a as a comic book universe, which is an interesting flavor. And yeah, just it's a fun Spider-Man book, especially Spider-Man just one of those. There's a reason why he's the biggest Marvel character. Why his movies are always huge.
yeah,
And yeah, so it's just a light continuity Spider-Man book, but with some interesting variations on his relationships and his dynamics, so forth. It's pretty cool. And then West Coast Avengers is a new book I talked about last time on Comic Catch Up with Kevin. Issue one come out, now issue two has been out, and it's still just a really neat book. And I'm really curious what they're doing with this whole Ultron as a faith healer concept. We didn't move that much forward in issue two. That's clearly the long burning plot there, but I'm really curious what where that's going to go. So that has me hooked.
Nice. Yeah. Out of those, definitely out of the Ultimate books, I've only really landed on Ultimate Spider-Man. I like the family that they have, and Mary Jane and the kids, and a fresh take on Spider-Man. The art's been great. Haven't picked up West Coast Avengers, but have my eye on it for a trade or when it comes available on Marvel Unlimited to look through that. But I did hear you guys talk about what they're doing with Ultron and what that could do is a neat tech. What a great villain and a classic Avengers villain. If you could play around with that in terms of do you trust it or not, is a cool idea. Cool idea. All
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Well, that is our lightning round and quick hits. Let's hop over to the main books we want to focus on today. And so, DC, as we've talked about before, when it comes to comics, how do you get fresh readers? How do you keep people interested when certain books and characters become stale, or you're getting a little tired of it, or whatever? You got to find a way to refresh it, reboot it, have a fresh take on things. And so, DC has been trying to find its continuity. Legs for a while, and eventually they got to a point they're like, hey, creative teams, do whatever you want. And then sometimes that confuses long term readers and what it does with continuity and what sticks or not. So they did a kind of a soft relaunch called All In DC, where they're like, hey, they're all in with all their characters, and they created this kind of side universe called the Absolute Universe. And I think it's called Earth Alpha. Am I right about that, Andy?
that sounds right.
Yeah. So they had this all in special with Darkseid, and he created this kind of pocket alternate universe Earth thing out of some of his shenanigans or things he was doing. Read the all in one shot special. But it's connected to Darkseid in a pocket universe, a new pocket universe. And so this absolute universe, absolute DC happened. And so you have the three main books. You have Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, and it's called Absolute Batman, Absolute Superman, Absolute Wonder Woman, where they're having these not they're not changing the origin stories a whole lot, but there's definitely a twist to it and a fresh take on the character from a different angle. Since it's a darker, different world, it may not be the same origin story of what happened with Clark or with Bruce or Diana in the regular DC universe. So the creative teams behind these books are the top in the business, and that's another kind of attracted me to them. If it was just someone I didn't know, and they were like, "Oh, we're creating an alternate universe for Batman," I don't know if I would have paid attention to it, but the team on that and on these books really had me try them out, and I'm loving all three. And so I guess let's talk about Annie. Are you reading all three of these?
I don't know how long I will keep up with all of them, but I'm up to date on the first three issues of all of them. I didn't get to see yesterday's All Star, or I'm sorry, Absolute Batman number four, but otherwise
Right.
I'm up on all of them.
Yeah. I'm going to stick with it. I'm curious which ones you're are on the maybe on the chopping block and which one you're sticking with. But let's talk about Absolute Batman first. This out of the three, this has been my favorite, and when I go to the comic store and things I really look forward to reading that's at the top of the stack, or I read in the parking lot in my car when I get it sometimes because I can't wait to read it. Absolute Batman has been that way for me. You're reading this, and you want to share kind of what is different about this Batman or Wayne family than the other mainline DC universe. You want to, without spoiling too much, but can share what makes this a little different than the other.
Sure. I mean, I think there's this one's the biggest number of differences, right? Because you've got Batman. So Bruce Wayne didn't grow up super rich or an orphan. He grew up in a working class family, or more, in that kind of, his dad was a teacher. I don't know how you might classify that, but more of a working class family. His dad died, but his mom did not when he was a young boy. So his mom is still alive, where he's now a young man in this present day story.
Right.
And so, as a consequence, Alfred is not the family butler, but Alfred maintained his career in the British Secret Services or military.
Ugh, I
So
love this
he's
Alfred
a
so
grizzled
much.
war veteran.
Yes, he is.
Um, and Batman was childhood friends with most of the people that we would think of as his rogues gallery or the core of his rogues gallery. And so, we don't, they're not necessarily villains yet and may not ever be. But, folks like Edward Nigma and Selena Kyle and
Hmm.
Harvey Dent are are his friends, his poker buddies, and so forth. And so we're still kind of learning what that means. But yeah, so those are the kind of the big to me what stand out as the points of departure.
Yeah, and he still has this, this, I guess in the opening book, the where his dad was killed as a kind of a victim of gun violence at a zoo on a childhood like school trip to the zoo, and from there you get kind of a flash forward where you have a young Bruce Wayne who is the Batman, but he's not like a rich ninja, wiry like kung fu artist or ninja. He's a jacked uh, muscle builder, has to use his resources. We'll figure out where he gets his resources from to get his cape and costume and gadgets, but as this underground vigilante. But yeah, he's not doing it from $1 billion. He's doing it from hard grit and work from that. And so I think the villain in this book is classic Scott Snyder. Um, and it's called monkey wild. I don't know. Remind me of the villains who we fought with that first one. They have these like full monkey masks. They're tech that give them access to like cryptocurrency and underground missions to do for this organized worldwide organized crime unit. But man, the designs are super cool, and the artist, the creative team behind that, Scott Snyder, of some Batman fame and horror fame. And Nick Dragata, I think that's how you say his name. He's one of my favorite artists in the business as well, who did East and West with Hickman. And this creative team's fantastic, and the story they're weaving and first taking Batman, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun. Like I say, the villains for the first few issues, very visually striking. It's one of these, like distributed crime gang kind of ideas where you just sort of sign up and by putting on the mask and you get an assignment and you go and do the thing. And so
Yeah,
there's a big bad behind it all, but Batman is having to confront large numbers of folks that aren't necessarily lifelong criminals, but are choosing woke up one day and chose violence at least for that day, and so that
yeah,
makes it a challenge for him, right? Obviously Batman is always trying to be non-lethal and so forth, but it's especially one of those challenges of like these folks aren't necessarily Arkham Asylum fodder. They are people who maybe had one bad day or
yeah.
made one bad choice, and need to be treated accordingly.
Yeah, and like you said about Alfred, he's more of a kind of a super spy, military on a mission to go observe what's happening in Gotham City with this crime gang unit, and he happens to stumble upon what Batman's up to, and he's intrigued, and you get inside his head with the narration of how he's observing this guy. He's just supposed to observe and not get involved, and kind of bring intel back to whoever he's working for, and so you get to be inside his mind. In the regular DC universe, Alfred's dead. Like they killed him off, and he's been dead for a while. And with if and when they merge the absolute universe with the regular DC universe, which I think is inevitable, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, that is an Alfred that I wouldn't mind coming back to the regular DC universe. I hope they hold on to him. If they're how are they going to bring Alfred back? They're going to bring him back at some point, right? I hope nobody just snaps a magic finger and brings the old Alfred back like it never happened. They could do that, but if there's a way to bring Alfred back and bring this guy back as the new Alfred, I wouldn't complain. Wouldn't complain at all. Uh, uh, Issue 4 that just came out yesterday, as of recording, is a more of a flashback of a younger Bruce Wayne who's trying to figure out how he is gonna get revenge or battle crime or avenge his dad's death, and kind of get in the mind of why he likes bats so much and why he chose a bat to become Batman. And it's a fantastic issue, another great one. Cool. Well, let's move on. I could talk about Absolute Batman forever, but the other Absolute books. Let's talk about Absolute Wonder Woman. Again, another fresh take. She wasn't necessarily raised on Paradise Island. She was sent to a different place to be raised. Mainly hell and and the underground of death, and so of course she has a different edge to her. She still has her innate character of wanting to help and be a hero, but she was raised in a different environment. And of course, that nature nurture kind of thing shapes who she's going to be and um, how she navigates the world as a hero with her strength and power. Annie, you're reading this book. What are your thoughts on Wonder Woman? Is this? I forgot to ask you. Is Batman? Are you going to stick with Absolute Batman, and then is Absolute Wonder Woman on the chopping block for you?
I think actually it's probably Absolute Superman is the one most likely to
Okay,
move to wait for the library status.
gotcha.
Because I really like Kelly Thompson
Mm-hmm.
as a writer, and I like, although the demon, the magic underworldy kind of thing about Wonder Woman not really normally my thing, but I really like how it the compassion of Diana has
Mm,
remained.
yeah.
And so, because I was worried with that setup that it was going to, we were going to get like the dark, grizzled Wonder Woman who, you know, whatever, that kind of direction. But, while she has a hard edge to her, she still has that core of compassion and desire to help and willingness to sacrifice and so forth. So I thought that was a really interesting contrast. I love, there's a great storytelling moment in the first issue where we get kind of a montage of Diana growing up, and there's a just a couple panel sequence of like toddler Diana encountering this like fire breathing lizard, and she kind of picks it up and just says no, and then like gives it a little kiss on its head, and then just kind of snuggles with it, and just it just really sells that like okay she's tough, but she's also that
Mm.
compassion and that connection with all life and not just other people is very strong and is still there. So that I thought that was a great little sequence.
Yeah, the art. Have you were you familiar with Hayden Sherman before this book?
I can't say that I may have read other books that they've drawn, but I can't say that that was a name that I was familiar with previously.
Yeah, the other like the other artists, and I've heard these writers before, but this is the one artist that I wasn't very familiar with. But man, knocking out of the park with this book. And there's another sequence in that first issue where the room that's her home slowly over the course of these silent panels becomes more filled in, becomes more of a room in a home. So at first it's just like a cave, and then it has like a bed in the corner, and then it has like a chair and a fire, and then another one has like books, like a library. Like it becomes more and more
Hmm.
of a home for Diana and the one who's raising her in this place, which is a neat sequence. And that's why I love the sequential art alongside the narration and words. Sometimes comics can have too many words. Sometimes it had not enough, but that balance of art telling the story, this book really, really does it well. Like scale too, like the scale of the monster, the scale of who she is and her sword and lasso, all those things. Pretty outstanding. Yeah, Kelly does a good job with this book, and I really love it. This was a surprise. This is the one I was like, I don't know. And then once I get into it, it's like, yep, I got to keep with this one too.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's move to Absolute Superman. Jason Aaron of Thor and Avengers fame moved over to DC. He's done a little bit of Batman stuff and a little Superman stuff. Now he's doing Absolute Superman. What is the difference here? Is Kal-El from Krypton? His parents are battling like um, conceited and hubris-driven scientists. But what is different about Kal-El here than in the other universe, Andy?
Yeah. So the big difference is that he grew up on Krypton, right? And after issue 3, I'm a little bit more confused as to the timeline of everything.
Yeah.
but that still, that that is the main distinction. And so when we first meet him in the first issue, he's a young adult. He's kind of starting out in his Superman career, but he's still learning about Earth because he did not grow up there.
Right.
And so, yeah, so he's much more disconnected from Earth culture, Earth people. It doesn't have those relationships. He's just sort of a force for good, but a sort of alien force. So it really highlights that alienness of Superman. He does have
Mhm.
an AI suit that helps
Yep.
him, so that he's not totally isolated. But yeah, so that's the main difference there, is just where he grew up, and that lack of connection to the Kent family.
Yeah, again, that nature nurture, who these are in their own characters, but how they were raised and the environment they were raised in really makes them, the heroes they are in the main DC universe. Same way here with Clark or Kal-El. He's older when he comes to Earth. He was raised by his parents in the environment of Krypton. You get a good snapshot of what Krypton is about and its class system, caste system. It's you have a gift, so you're either going to pass and go work for the super scientists or these different areas of military, or you're just kind of uh, a, a farmer kind of person. And his parents are ones who are trying to ring the bell of warning still, again, that Krypton, that there's something nefarious going on, or their environment's crumbling, or they've missed something. And so they're trying to warn people but also escape. And there's a little bit of a backstory of not knowing, yeah, when does Kal-El, where does Cal get to Earth? But then um yeah, like he was raised by his own parents, not by Ma and Pa Kent. So there's a different take on him, and the twist here is he doesn't have the red cape from Krypton. It's nanotech, AI tech, and so he can use that cape almost like a spawn cape that has a mind. He can use it. Yes, he can fly. He can use it to protect people, force field, but it's an extension of him, not like Iron Man armor, but it's definitely some AI nanotech that is different here with the red cape, which it's different.
Hmm.
I think it's kind of a neat way to think about different take on his suit. Um, he definitely still has superpowers because he's from a different planet, but there is more with this suit and robotics and AI than the normal Superman.
Yeah. Although that's one of the things that was kind of holding me back on the book. It feels like
Mm,
it has a very first base take on AI. I get that a
mm.
lot of the stuff that has developed recently has all come about very quickly, and so a lot of people are still kind of orienting to it, figuring it out. And obviously, I can understand why writers feel an existential threat to having computer systems that can just generate text ad nauseum. But already I've seen just recently several comics, different writers comment on how AI can't ever really create anything. It just remixes
Mm.
existing things. And I'm sorry, writers, I get where you're coming from, but you're not making a compelling case for human creativity when everybody's making the same comments about the difference between humanity and AI, just
Yeah.
phrasing it slightly differently. So I
Hmm.
get it's early days. I get that everybody's reacting to something that just kind of feel like came out of nowhere. But yeah, I think we're going to need to be able to articulate more about human creativity than just that one distinction as we move forward.
Yeah, and Jason Aaron kind of cut his teeth on, and he makes no bones about like him challenging the power structures and systems that are governing, whether it's religion or other things. So Thor, you got the God Butcher, you have these systems, these institutions that he's really kind of challenging a different way of thinking at it. And in this book, with Krypton, he's challenging like the scientists and the super science of the day on Krypton is what he's kind of rebelling against. So even in issue 3 of Absolute Superman, Clark, we see his journalistic chops, and he's writing his own paper, and they chastise him for not using the AI tech to write it for him. And he's like, no, I want to use my own words. And they're kind of looking down on him for using his own brain, his own words to write this school assignment. So you can kind of see what Jason Aaron's doing there, kind of wink at what's going on in society with AI or chat, GBT, those kinds of things. So it's a different angle to look at it. I like this book. I like Jason Aaron. I like the art. Um, So I'm gonna keep reading these. There may be a point when, the second story arc that I kind of I can't buy everything, so may drop out and wait for the trade or see how they merge it with the DC universe. But all three of these books I'm on board with, and reading will get it's in my monthly pull for sure. So out of all these, which one's your favorite? Would you say, Andy?
It's still for now absolute Batman.
Yeah.
The other thing I struggled with Superman was we didn't really get Superman's perspective, especially for those first two issues.
Mm.
Kevin and I talked about that a little bit last time because that the Batman book does kind of something similar, but for some reason Batman stories work better when Batman is kind of a background figure, or we're not quite in his head as much. It still works okay. My new theory for I didn't have an explanation for that. But I've been thinking about it since last time, and my theory, and you can make of this what you will, is that Superman is a noun and Batman is a verb, and that's why different kinds of stories work with Superman and Batman.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great theory. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, since I was a kid in Super Friends, I've loved these three characters, and I can't say I'm reading the main Superman book in DC or even the main Batman book. I fell off that. I'm reading Detective because Tom Taylor's on it. I'm not reading Tom King's Wonder Woman book. I tried it, but it just didn't hit me right, and can't do and buy and read everything. But I am reading all these three, so they got me. I was a little skeptical going in because Absolute DC is similar to like the Ultimate Universe of Marvel. We're going to give you a fresh take and a different version, and kind of like Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men from way back when, the early 2000s to even now. So I was a little skeptical of this darker, grittier universe with a different take on these characters. Like, oh, here we go. But I love it, and I'm reading it, and they're right now. I feel like they're knocking out of the park. So, yeah, it's gonna be good. If you're not picking up these books, they'll be worth a trade at the library, or to buy and put on your shelf to read, because I think for a while, and on eBay they're very expensive. I think the first Batman A cover is 2025. Almost $40 on eBay already, and it's only been a few months. So it's definitely the hot book on the stand for sure.
Yep.
All right. Well, here we go. Guess what? There are a lot of X-Men comics out there. Annie and I are big X-Men fan. We grew up on this. Some of our favorite characters and comics and stories emerged out of the X-Men universe. And man, there's a lot. There's like 20 books and even growing. I just saw with this one World Under Doom that's coming out in a couple months. They're gonna have a new X book called Weapon X-Men #1, another new #1. Am I gonna have to get that one? Maybe. But there's like 6 to 8 team books, and then there's 8 to 10 individual characters that have their own books here. So adjective X-Men, uncanny, exceptional. There's adjective less X-Men, just the X-Men book, and then all in between. I can't afford $20 a month, 20 books a month at the comic book store. Andy, I don't know about you, but which X books are you connecting with, and which ones are you kind of passing over? And it's a big ask of us to talk about this for a few minutes, but yeah, what are you connecting with in this? Well, or maybe go a little bit of the history from Krakoa to now, and where we are now, and why there are all these X books, I guess.
Yeah, so then maybe I maybe got the slides in the wrong direction, right? Because we
Yeah.
kind of started with a lot of the team books,
Yeah.
and that's always been the X Men bread and butter. From my perspective, right? So we had the Krakoa era, and that obviously had to come to an end at some point. And what do you follow that up with? And one of the big shifts was changing who is the main editor on all the books, right? So Tom Brevoort came over from years and years of being the editor of kind of everything that isn't X Men, mostly Avengers and so forth. And he took over as the main editor for the X books and brought his perspective and so forth. As somebody who, from what I understand, was never really the biggest X Men person,
Right.
and there was a reason why he hadn't been overseeing those books, but now he's in charge of them. And so, from my perspective, I don't know that for sure that this is what he's doing, but the Avengers side of the line has always been a couple of team books maybe, or even just one team book, and then a bunch of individual character books. And so I think that's part of what he's bringing to the X Men line is,
Nice. Yeah.
we started out with some team books because that's what the X Men are, but then expanding out into trying, I think this is the most ongoing solo titles that there
Oof.
have been for the X-Men, and that's a big
Yeah.
part of why there are just so many books. And I don't think the expectation is that everybody will be buying all of them. 20 books a month, like I say, that's just kind of crazy. I think the idea is more just let's make as many different things as we possibly can, and and then people will find what kind of pick and choose what they like, what they don't like. And more like on the Avengers side of the world had been for so many years, where some people just read Iron Man and some people just read Captain America and whatever. So in terms of what I'm connecting with, I would say there isn't one book that's like, oh yeah, that's definitely my book.
Right.
There have been, I think, probably the X-Men book, just X-Men by Jed McKay, and
Stegman.
yeah, Stegman was the initial artist, and they've had some other folks that's been going for a while. I think I like the setup there the best. I like that kind of let's take a team of people that haven't been on a team together before. I think that's one of the great things about X-Men is you take a bunch of characters. There's so many characters to choose from.
Yeah.
Take a handful of them that haven't been on a team before and see how their personalities interact, how their powers interact, how they can team up together to use those powers in creative ways. And maybe throw in some big sci-fi ideas every now and again, or some big high concepts or whatever. That's kind of what
Yeah.
I want out of an X-Men book. And to
Yeah.
me, Jed McKay's Uncanny X or Adjectiveless X-Men rather is the closest to that.
Yeah. I agree.
Individual issues, some have been better than others. But yeah, I think there's a cool team there, and I'm enjoying the dynamics between them, and they've had some creative uses of the way that they combine their powers and use their powers. So I enjoyed that. I wanted to like X Factor more than I have so far.
Yeah.
I think it's just a little bit too silly at times for the kind of serious topics, but it does have some. Every now and then there'll be some good ideas. Uncanny X Men, obviously, Gail Simone is an all-time, you know, good writer. Has been around for a long time and put out a lot of good work. And she's writing kind of more of a classic team of you got Rogue and Gambit and Wolverine and Nightcrawler, right? Some and Jubilee, pretty cartoon familiar
Yeah.
or cartoon viewer friendly lineup. But that first storyline, just with the sort of, I don't quite get who that Sarah, Gaunt,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
is she magical? Is she what? She's kind of Lady Deathstrike, got these, but she's super strong. I just
Mhm.
didn't quite understand
Yeah.
what she represented, and so yeah, that's been a tough book to get into, even though those are definitely some cool characters. Um,
Yeah, and even with that book, like I'm with you. The just the regular plain X-Men book has been my favorite so far with that team, and I like it when they can mix them up and people you haven't seen before and how they use their powers. I like the new, I guess it's Temper, who is kind of a newer mutant, a part of that team. So you have some classic ones like Magic and Juggernaut and Cyclops, but you have Temper, and who can wield fire and ice. I kind of like her, but the other and Uncanny X-Men, I like that team. I like Nightcrawler, I like Rogue, like kind of X-Men animated '97 team. But the new mutants they brought on, I love it when they introduce new mutants with new powers. But
hmm
I still have to look online and figure out what their powers are and who they are and what they're doing. I mean, don't make it hard for me to understand who these people. I know there's some mystery, but if they have a
hmm
power set, if I don't understand your power set after like 3 or 4 issues, then I think that's a problem. Or who the villain is, the motivation for the villain. You have like Calico, Death Dream, Jitter, and Ransom. I kind of understand Jitter is hyper focus. She can do anything. She can do anything for a minute,
Right.
right? Her skill level. Um, Death Dream is a kid that can go in and out of like death state, alive state, summon ghosts. Calico just has like a psychic connection with a horse, and that horse can sometimes have wings or fire or I don't know. And then Ransom has a black hole for a heart, but I can't tell if he like was super strong like Sunspot or if he can super gravity powers to steer things. I just don't understand his powers.
Yeah,
Were those clear to you? Does that have
no,
clear?
I 100% agree that I another difficulty connecting with that book is just there's too many mysteries, and some of them
Yeah.
seem like deliberate mysteries, and some of them just seem like it's not clear
Hmm.
writing, or there isn't a clear idea there, right? What? Yeah, exactly. Ransom. What is his deal? Why does not having a heart make him strong? Make him
Yeah.
indestructible? Why does that not make him dead? I get that. Suspension of disbelief, right? All of this stuff you can't think of it, you can't dig into too quickly, too deeply, because it falls apart. But yeah, just I don't even get, like I said, what's the one sentence kind of hook of his power? I could not tell you. Calico, the same thing. Does the horse have powers? Does she have powers?
Yeah. Yeah.
What there's obviously that one is meant to be a little bit more of a mystery, but there's just too many, and that would be fine if that was the one mystery. But I think there's just too many mysteries and too much ambiguity there. It's the same problem the first Captain Marvel movie had, right? Where you
Yeah.
can, it's an interesting idea for a story, but then the end result is you spend all this time with a character that you don't really get to know. And
Yeah.
I think this book has the same problem. We're spending a lot of time with characters, but we're not really getting to know them, and so yeah, it's just hard to hook into. And then also on the side, like Gambit is kind of a sorcerer now, like because he's got the Eye of Agamotto, but there's two eyes of Agamotto now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a lot of ingredients in that stew, and maybe with some more time on the stove, it'll all come together. But yeah, right now it's just hard to.
Yeah, and I guess the question is there a problem with flooding the market with too many X titles? Like, is it like they're the more the merrier, and you're just gonna hit and like shotgun it out there, and maybe someone will pick up some stuff, but and there's a lot of mutants to dive into, but there's definitely friends of mine who are comic book fans who like don't know where to start with the X-Men, and they're like, there's just too many characters and too many storylines. I just don't. It's easier for me to not get into it because it's very confusing to them. And so I'm wondering if like a Joss Whedon, when he did Astonishing X-Men, he just kind of went back to the basics, and he says, I don't want anybody with luck powers. I want your power base. I remember in the interview him saying, no luck powers. I just want you to you either fly, you shoot lasers, or you control the weather, or you have claws, like or healing factor. He wanted it like really clear what their superpowers are and not this whatever. So I think Chris Claremont, when he was creating New Mutants, again, there's only so many superpowers you can dream up and get creative. So he retread a lot of things with a lot of characters. But in terms of these X books, I just need to know what their deal is. Along, even if they have a learning curve of them trying to figure out how to use their powers, I at least want to know what their powers are and go on that journey with them. Um, so that's kind of where I am. If somebody right now said, "All right, I want to get into X-Men. Where do I start?" I'm like, "Oof, man, that's a hard one." On the ones on the shelf right now, it'd be hard to jump into. From the solo ongoing series, there's a lot. Again, I said like 10 different character X-Men that have their own single titles. Is there one here that you're connecting with?
Well, you were talking about the problem of flooding the market, and that made me jump over here because I think one of the issues here is, well, already we've got the Psylocke book and the Laura Kinney Wolverine book kind of are the
Mhm.
same, right? You've got
Yeah,
characters who feel like they've been defined by being assassins and being in murders, and that they were mind controlled and trained to be killers as they were brought up at against their will, and now their mission is to save kids, so
yeah,
that other kids don't have the same fate that they did. And so yeah, it's like I get those are two different characters, but those books really need to a premise that distinguishes them. It also doesn't help that you've got the two different books that are basically called Wolverine, right? I get that the title of one is Laura Kinney Wolverine, but
yeah,
as a new reader walking into the store, right? How do I know which Wolverine book do I want to buy?
yeah, yep,
So yeah, I think on the one hand, I get the idea of something for everybody. Not everybody's going to read all of them. No, but yeah, I think there is also that risk of if there's so many, you just kind of wash over all of them, and nothing clicks, nothing lands, or you don't know where to begin. And that there have been some weird, like Sentinels and Mystique had had like two issues where it was like, well, if you're not really reading the other book, you don't really know what's going
Yeah.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that that's a weird unadvertised crossover. Those are two books that I'm not necessarily I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, you should be they go together. Like if you like the one, you'll like the other. And
Yep.
yet, if you're reading Sentinels and you didn't pick up Mystique, you don't know why Magneto showed up in that book. Um,
Yeah.
and it didn't even like I thought, okay, well, in the next issue they'll explain that. But no, you had to. The explanation was only in Mystique. You had to
Mm-hmm.
read that other book to know what was going on. And to me, that's the wrong kind of intertitle continuity. When the reader doesn't know that it's coming and doesn't know where to look to see that other stuff and isn't necessarily going to be reading, you're kind of saying the premise, if the premise is just pick up the books that you like, well, you can't tell me that, but then also tell me actually you have to read all of them because you never know from one month to the next which story beats, which plot threads are going to show up in which other books. I don't mind a crossover now and again, like the Uncanny X-Men and X-Men crossover that we just had. Like that's fine. It made sense for those books to bump into each other, and that was advertised in advance, and it's on the cover and all. Like that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But it's just
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, by the way, to know to follow this book, you have to read three other books that we didn't tell you. You had to you just have to kind of piece that together yourself. That I
Yeah.
think you got too much going on.
I agree. And eventually, when you have these kind of three different books or team books, at some point there's going to be a crossover. You just know that you're going to have to, if you want to stick with it or there's an overall story, they got to mix them up together. Why are they apart? Why they're not together? They'll eventually unfold that for us. But there's some characters I really like. I really like Jean Grey. I really like Storm. But if it's not a creative team that I connect with, then I'll find them in other places or get the trade later on if people tell me it's a good story, because I just can't buy all these books. Storm's now even on the Avengers. They've
Mm-hmm.
kind of sidelined Thor, and so they brought Storm onto the Avengers as their kind of like lightning wielder god, weather god, for that team, which is kind of fun to put an X-Men on the Avengers like that. That's kind of fun to see Storm on that book. But yeah, some of these I've picked up the first issue just to try, and if I don't really connect initially with that first issue doesn't really hit me right, then I'm going to wait till later on. I do like Wolverine, Martin Cocola, the artist. We've become friends with him online with Across the Bifrost, and so it's kind of fun to see him really shine in that craft as being an artist and connect with him through Instagram and DMing and stuff and asking how things are going and which Comic Cons are on. So it's kind of fun. So he's definitely an artist that I've gotten to know over the years, and will follow him wherever he goes. So I'm reading that Wolverine book. I'm not sure though if he wasn't on that book if I'd be reading Wolverine, but to support Martin and his work, and I love his art. If he hopped over to a character I never even heard of, I'd probably still follow him. But yeah, yeah. I love X-Men. I'm going to keep out of habit. There's some books I collect because of the creative team. There's some I just do out of habit because I've always done it. And X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, I'm just going to always collect, no matter who's on that book. They might do some things that I might take a break for a little while and wait for a relaunch or soft reboot. But most of the time, I'm probably going to pick up that X-Men book or Uncanny book just to kind of keep up with the mutants and try to figure out what's going on with them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
out of all these comics, whether it's X-Men or Absolute, is there a comic that you would suggest that our listeners and fans out there, they to get their hands on this comic, don't wait for the trade, like hop on it?
Um, you know, it's tempting to say Absolute Batman, right? But that's also uh, that's an easy answer. I'm to kind of review the
Yeah.
um, the options here. I would say one book that I've enjoyed, even though just kind of lamenting the issue of Sentinels. I've enjoyed the Mystique book more than I expected.
Nice.
Um, and it as I understand it, it's only slated to be a 5 issue miniseries, and it's basically Mystique versus Nick Fury, and that's an interesting mashup there. So, and one that I haven't seen before. So yeah, I think if that kind of like spycraft side of things, kind of story with with some characters that haven't been overdone in terms of their interaction and so forth, and that will be you know from the get go, his plan is just here's a contained story, done in 5 issues or a single trade. I think that's probably what be one of the more satisfying reads for somebody who who's maybe just looking for one book to try
Nice.
things out. And while I talked about the Sentinels crossover, I think it was more confusing for Sentinels than the other way. I think the Mystique side of things reads just fine and kind of explains what you need to know. I thought from the Sentinel side of things was more confusing and more like you really had to go and have read the other book. But yeah, I think Mystique should work just fine on its own.
Yeah, Mystique's one of my favorite X Men villains slash could be a hero depending on what's going on. Because when I was a kid reading those books, she was just that shapeshifter, and what she did with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, just so good. Connected with me those comics from Claremont. Really, whenever she showed up, I was like, "Oh crap, something's going down." And being a shapeshifter, you don't know what you can trust around you or not. I
Mm-hmm.
tried to get into this book; it was a little too wordy for me, and I was a little lost and distracted. So I was like, "Well, I'll pick it up later and see." The creative team's not bad, the art's not bad; it's a little different. But yeah, I'll wait and see later on. But man, I love Mystique. I love her as a villain. Well, cool. And I'll say, if I'm going to answer that question, I would say absolute Batman. I think it's just a great story arc. Scott Snyder's doing great. Scott Snyder has great and big ideas. Sometimes is in my humble opinion, it's hard for him to finish the story well, or how do you land the plane? People probably say that about my sermons as well. I have a good hook, good middle part, good story, good theology, but how do I land that plane? Probably my endings aren't great. So I definitely relate to that struggle. But man, he's weaving a great tale, and the pacing and the art is just fantastic. So absolutely Batman for sure. Grab that one. If you can. So that's all. Anything else we're kind of missing, Andy, that we need to bring up?
Uh, I know. I think we've covered the state of absolute DC and the fall of the ashes or from the ashes X-Men world pretty well.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, comics always have this rhythm of a big launch, a big event to try to pull in new readers and get their long-term readers excited about things. And then eventually kind of things fall off or get stale. You move on and they'll do it again. So there'll always be, new number ones, reboots, retcons, all that stuff. That's just the nature of the business to get attention. There's a lot of choices out there when it comes to our entertainment and stories and books and streaming. So you gotta figure out how to get the headlines or some way. And comics will always do that. So I try to make some rule with my own pools and comic store that I don't. If I grab a new book, I'm gonna have to look and see which book am I not that excited about, so that I just can't buy everything, can't afford everything. So I kind of pick and choose and drop a few things, add a few things. But I think the State of the Union in the comics is pretty good. Other than the X books just having way too much. Um, to pull from, but I admire um, the intent of trying to get the X Men are hot with that X-Men '97 cartoon, and they can be a part of the MCU at some point, and just flood the market. But I think comics industry is doing okay right now. How would you say this State of the Union with comics right now, Andy?
Yeah, I mean we've talked a lot of superhero books, but there's also a lot of other interesting and cool books out there from folks self-publishing and other publishers and so forth.
Yeah,
I just tried, and comic book shops, right, are a cool place, and we want them to be around, and
yeah,
all that. But also, like your local library is a cool place to try things if you're not so sure about whether you want to put your money into it, but you have some time that you're willing to give to it. And either physical books on the library shelf or services like Hoopla are a cool way to try out things. So I've been trying to read more things that way outside of the superhero world. I tried Scarlet, so I guess they're relaunching the GI Joe books,
yeah. Hmm.
and so I tried the Scarlet series, the first trade of that to kind of see what that was all about. That was pretty fun. Pretty sure that was also Kelly Thompson, which is how I got there.
Yeah.
That was a fun, kind of Black Widow esque story. If you like that sort of thing. I've tried Adventure Man, Matt Fraction, and
Huh.
what are the um, our Terry Dodson, the Dodsons are
Oh,
on the
cool.
art on that book. So kind of flashback to Uncanny X Men of 10, 15 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, so kind of revisiting the world of like pulp heroes. The kind of like 30s serials of pulp heroes, that the same tradition that like Indiana Jones comes out of, but bring that into a 21st century kind of context. So that was I wasn't sure what to expect from that, and it definitely went places I did not expect, and that I enjoyed more for it. So that was cool. So yeah, so there's lots of cool things out there. Lots of different, there's mystery comics and fantasy comics and sci-fi comics without superheroes, and sci-fi comics with superheroes, and
That's right.
um, you know all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I think that it is a good time to be a comic reader, because if there is something that you like, there's probably a book about it for it, probably 12 of them. Uh,
I agree. I agree. And I can't believe I've gone a whole comic catch up without talking about Daniel Warren Johnson. Like, I mean, he's one of I love him and what he does. He has a couple books out there, creator owned, and also working with Transformers and their relaunch of G.I. Joe and Transformers and the Integron. How do you say that? The
Energon.
Energon universe. Robert Kirkman's done with Image. So yeah, there's a lot of good books out there, and I don't see them going anywhere. We're gonna have an episode coming up on Systematic Ecology about like, do we support comic shops or do digital? Is there a way for the environment to do less paper and do digital, or what should we support? What can we, what do we prefer? And I'm definitely a comic book shop guy because I like to go in and talk shop with the comic book owners and what they're reading and have the physical copy in my hands. But there's also something to be said about digital comics and people who are trying to create their own web series and a good way for me to read back issues is Marvel Unlimited, to go look and see if someone referenced something, to go back and find it on Marvel Unlimited and not feel like I have to go pay $20 or look through a dollar bin forever to find a particular book, to hunt it down, that it's there at my fingertips. So there's different ways to consume this type of media and storytelling. But yeah, I love comics. I will always love comics. I'll always read and collect comics and forever. Even though I need to thin out probably my collection and probably maybe thin out my pull box a little bit every time I try. It's that's hard work. But yeah. Um, hey, friends, like this show again, 50 likes, and I'll dance in the snow in my bathing suit, or other YouTube exclusives here on Systematic Ecology. That's a promise. We're past me frolicking through flowers because it's not summer or spring, but it's supposed to snow here this weekend. So who knows if this particular episode gets 50 likes. I'll do it. I'll do it. And let us know what you're reading. Let us know what you're collecting. If we missed a book and you're like, why aren't you talking about this one? Let us know if there's a graphic novel or a storyline that you want us to kind of hone in on and talk about the philosophical, theological, and the big questions that's coming to the surface in those books. Let Andy or myself know, and we'll be sure to add it to one of our episodes coming up. Andy, always fun talking comics with you, and yeah, man, I hope that yeah, we'll connect again soon in these books, and we'll chat online.
Yeah, good to see you, Will. Happy New Year, and look forward to the next time.
Yeah. All right.